Hey guys, Ginger here. Welcome back to my channel, and today we are going to be talking about my top 10 favorite books of 2019. Making this list was kind of difficult, I'm not gonna lie. I had a little bit of a hard time narrowing down my top favorites, and a few of these are actually series as a whole because I rated them all very high, but then some of them are just books that are standalones or starts to a series, and there were a lot of good books that I read this year, so definitely narrowing it down was difficult, but I did get a list of 10 to talk about today. And so I'm going to be going from number 10 to number 1, which would be my most favorite book of the year. And then tomorrow I will be doing the same for the worst books of the year. So I figured we would start on a good note after Christmas and talk about the best ones. So without further ado, let's get into talking about the best books of 2019. A couple of these books, sadly enough, I don't own yet, but that is because I read them on audiobook or ebook or whatever, borrowed them from the library. Number 10 is one of these books, and it is the only nonfiction that I read this year, and it was really great. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, and that was Smoke Gets in Your Eyes, Tales from the Crematory, and I got this on ebook on my reading account, and it was one that I had heard previously about from Natasha over at My Reading is Odd, and it just sounded really intriguing to me. I am interested in that kind of stuff, in the macabre, and working in that type of job would be difficult. And in this book she talks about what it's like to work in that position and what all it entails, and it was just so fascinating. And normally I have a hard time reading ebooks, but I got through this one in a very short amount of time, and I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars, and I would really like to add it to my collection. I just think it's great, and I would want other people to read it. But like I said, I did read it on my Amazon account, but it did make my top 10 list for the year. Next, number 9, I do own, and I read this for my romance readathon back in February. That seems like such a long time ago, and it is the only, this is the one of 2 romances on my pile, and I was thoroughly surprised that I enjoyed this so much, and it was my first Christina Lauren, and that was Love and Other Words by Christina Lauren, and this one made me sob like a baby, and I just thought it was a really, really great book that talked about a romance that was lost and rekindled, and the characters were really sweet and relatable. And like I said, I did cry at some of the things that were brought up towards the end of the book, and usually if a book makes me cry, it becomes one of my favorites, and that was the case with this one. And it made me also really interested to read some more of Christina Lauren's books, and so I'm really happy that I read this one and I picked it up. And if you haven't got to it yet, I highly recommend it. It is one of their first novels, I think. I could be wrong because this was from 2018. But really good. That's the point. Next we have a book that I almost just died. Next we have a book that Zach recommended to me, and I thought I would really enjoy it, but I also wasn't sure how I would feel about it, and I'm really glad that he told me to pick it up and read it because I thoroughly did enjoy it, and I can't wait to continue on with this series, and that is The Eye of the World by Robert Jordan, which is the first book in the Wheel of Time series, which is about 14 books long, so yay me and long series. This is a high adult fantasy novel that follows our main characters, Rand, Matt, and Perrin, and they pretty much go on an adventure and learn about magic and their world, and it was just a great journey, and it was one of the longest books that I read this year. It was 814 pages, and it did take me a decent chunk for some reason. This mass market paperback took me a minute to read, but it was enjoyable, and I am glad that I started this fantasy series, and I do want to at least read the next book in the series, if not more, this coming year, so hopefully I can continue on. The next book on my list is another one that I don't have physically yet. I did borrow it from the library, and it was one of my more recent reads, and that was Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This year I started my journey with Taylor Jenkins Reid novels. I read One True Loves and The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo as well, but Daisy Jones was the one that stuck with me the most, and I ended up giving it a 4.5 out of 5 stars for just overall feeling, but the content and the writing style that Taylor Jenkins Reid has is just great and super enjoyable, and I did enjoy this one more than The Seven Husbands, which I know took booktube by storm last year, and I think this is one that's also going to be on a lot of other people's favorite lists because it spoke volumes in the short novel that it was, and it was just really great and a favorite historical fiction of mine, and I think that her historical fiction writing has made me more interested in reading more books like that in the future, so I am excited to see what she comes out with next, and I'm glad that I read that one. Number 6 is part of a duology, and I'm just going to show you the first book because I read both of them this year back to back and enjoyed both of them pretty moderately equally, and that is the Six of Crows duology by Leigh Bardugo. Leigh Bardugo and I have an interesting relationship because I read the Grisha trilogy and it was just average. I read this and it's one of my favorite duologies, and then I read Ninth House and it was just average again. So I am interested to see what I think of King of Scars. That is the last Leigh Bardugo I have to read still. This, just the characters, the world continuation from the Grisha trilogy, and just the heist and plot itself, all of it was really great, and I was very happy to fall in love with this duology as many other people have, and I'm super thankful that I got to read it this year, and now I own both the books for my shelves, and I understand the hype, and I am going to continue to praise this series. It was just really good, and I know I'm a little behind on the game because this isn't like a new release, but it was really great, and I'm glad that I got to read this duology this year. Halfway through the list, guys. Number 5, we have Scythe by Neil Shusterman. I'm telling you, this list was really hard to curate because this book was one of my favorites of the year, obviously, and putting it at number 5 seems cheap, but I read other great books. But this one is one of my new favorites. I cannot wait to read the rest of the trilogy. I'm going to be doing that in January. I got Thunderhead as a gift, an early gift, and then the Toll I'm getting for Christmas as well. So I'm excited, but this is just, Neil Shusterman creates such a fascinating world, and it just makes you think about this possibility. This could be something that happens. You never know. And pretty much death is eradicated, and the only way that you can die is if you are gleaned by a scythe, and we follow 2 apprentices to B-sides in this book, and it was just really interesting, really great characters and plot, and I've never read a Neil Shusterman book. I've heard about them all as a child, but this was the first one I picked up, and he did really great, and I know, again, this one or part of the series is going to be on a lot of people's list because this is just a great series, and I've honestly not heard anyone say anything negative about this. So, like I said, excited to continue on, and this was just really great 5 out of 5 star book. Number 4 is one that honestly surprised me. I didn't expect to like it as much because when it first came out, I think in 2018, it had a lot of mixed reviews, or maybe it was 2016, I don't know. And some people loved it, some people hated it, and I was really nervous going in thinking that I wasn't going to like it, but I really wanted to read it, and I am so glad I did because I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, and it's definitely great, and I can't wait to continue on with the series, and that is Truth Witch by Susan Dennard. This one was just great. Again, with this, I love the fantasy world that she builds. I love the character connections between our 2 main characters, Sophia and Iseult. I love the budding romances that are happening, the type of magic. There's just so much good in this book. And again, I didn't expect to love it as much as I did, but I loved it, and I immediately bought Wind Witch, even though I haven't read it yet, because I knew I wanted to continue on. And I am excited to see where the rest of the series goes, and I am super thankful that I read it, and it is on my top list this year. Getting down to the top 3, the third position is actually a quartet of books, because I rated each of them 5 out of 5 stars, and I did reread the first one this year, even though I had read it in the past, and that is the Lunar Chronicles by Marissa Meyer. I am going to hold up winter for that because this is the last one, and surprisingly enough, it was the biggest book that I read this year at almost 900 pages. Well, no, at 823 pages. I love this series. Like, I didn't expect to fall head over heels for it like I did, but I binged it this year. I could not wait to finish, even though I didn't want to finish because it's great. I love the characters. I love the fairy tale retelling and the spin that Marissa Meyer took on these characters and how she created this sci-fi fantasy world. It was wonderful. There's just so much I love about it, and I could gush over it in a video probably itself. But it had to be on this list because it is one of my favorite series of all time now. And honestly, I just want to push this on everybody to read because it was that good. So I just am so excited that I finished this year and I have the collection, and I cannot wait to read more of Marissa Meyer's work because everything else that she's come out with is stuff that I'm intrigued and I'm very interested in, and this series definitely paved the way for me to enjoy her work, and I am excited that I read such a great series this year. Number 2 is again kind of a series, and I don't own it because it's expensive, but that is the Saga series. Volumes 1 through 9 is what I read because that's all it's out. But oh my gosh, again, this was something that I binged on my Hoopla app. I got them and read them just over and over. This series is everything, and I'm very picky with graphic novels. My other all-time favorite graphic novel series is Fables, and when I just read Saga, I knew that there was a lot of hype, and that was another one that so many people loved, so I had high hopes, and I was not disappointed whatsoever. The art style, the story, the characters, everything about that series is fantastic, and I cannot wait to have it physically to put on my shelves, and I cannot wait to see what the creators come up with next in the series, because that cliffhanger, though, we didn't need that. That was just, and the journey that this graphic novel series just takes you on is magical and spectacular. Everything. So it definitely deserves the number 2 spot as a collection, and if you have not checked out Saga yet, you definitely need to. It is worth the hype, and I am so glad that I read it this year. And then we come to our number 1 spot, which you might not be surprised, you might be surprised. I was surprised. But when I read this, it became an automatic favorite forever. I laughed, I wanted to cry, I fell in love with the characters, and that is Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. Hype for this was big, and I was nervous because everyone was loving this. Everyone has loved this. I haven't seen a single bad review that, I'm sure there are, I haven't sought them out, but every booktuber that I've watched that's read this has loved this, and I can see why. This was just powerful, quick to read, great characters. Everything about this was awesome, and it speaks to political problems, it speaks to sexuality problems, and just there's so much in here, and Casey McQuiston did a great job. And I know that there are some technical flaws with this. Maybe the writing style isn't great. Maybe there's some things that could be better. But reading through this, I fell in love with it, despite any problems it might have. And I just want everyone to read this book. And this is very interesting for me as someone who's more of a fantasy thriller writer. I don't even think I put any thrillers on this list. Most of them are fantasy, and my top one was a romance novel. But it definitely deserves a spot. It definitely deserves the hype. I think everyone should read this book. I'm so glad I read it this year. I picked it up. I bought it brand new. It was one of the few books that I did buy brand new, and I am perfectly okay with that. It was worth it. I am so glad I read it, and again, it deserves its #1 spot on my list, in my opinion. And yeah, it was just great. So there you have it, guys. Those are my top 10 books that I read this year-ish. There were series, and they were all I'm just so glad that I read so many great books this year, and I'm very interested to see what books made your top list this year. Let me know in the comments below if we share any favorites. If you guys have a video similar to this on your channel, I would love to go watch it. But if not, just leave your favorite book of the year down below, and we can compare, and I will add them to my TBR if I have not yet, because I have definitely lots of shelf space to put those on. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to hit that subscribe button if you'd like to see more of my content in 2020 or the rest of this year. Like I said, tomorrow my worst video comes up, so stay tuned for that, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye!